I do hope that our leaders, who were also present at the Gothenburg Social Summit last November, will acknowledge the importance to invest massively in people in order to implement concretely the European Pillar of Social Rights.
Today we're talking, for example, about digitalization. What are we doing? Are we ready? How do we work? How do we take care of digital minorities who, even if they're not a problem today, certainly will be after 5 or 10 years? In no more than 1 decade, a person who is not on the internet and who is not computer literate will be more seriously marginalized than some of the marginalized groups we have at the moment. Investments in education and training prepare our future. To be able to build a Europe which protects us from the challenges of mobility.
What is really important is that the EU budget and the European Social Fund in particular should be about solidarity. It's really important. The construction of the EU is about solidarity, and the ESF should be about that, solidarity across member states.
The conference is a platform for debate on the changes which all European citizens are expecting, so that they can perceive the added value of the European Union. However, we need to be aware of important issues that remain about how fundamental the changes will have to be, and whether it will be possible for the interested parties to implement them quickly, so that we can make a smooth transition to the next program period.
As the country holding the presidency, we have set ourselves the ambitious aim of not only making a success of the presidency, but to be provocative with regard to the social dimensions of the next budget. Because if we want Europe to have a future, there will have to be investments in knowledge, skills, and working with high-risk groups. There will have to be investments in reforms to education systems and adult education systems for there to be a practical dimension to what every citizen can perceive.
This workshop was dedicated to the need for investment in policy reforms and the important role that structural funds can play in the implementation of these reforms.
First of all, structural reforms are very important. I would say they are essential to make sure that EU funds produce an efficient and effective impact on our well-being. The main conclusion that came out from this round of discussions is that there is a very strong linkages between the European semester, which suggests structural reforms to member states, and what actually the EU funds are doing on the field.
Another important topic discussed was the need for a continuous close link between the European semester and the specific recommendations made for each member state, notably for the European Social Fund. The participants had the opportunity to discuss these issues in a World Café format.
The need for more flexibility, we mean that we're living in an economy and a society that's constantly changing and asking for new challenges that needs new policy solutions. And also programming should adapt the new challenges. So in that way, programs could be more flexible, adjusting their focus, and that the program is not a straitjacket for 7 or 8 years.
It's a pleasure to moderate this discussion this afternoon. It was very wide-ranging, and I think what some of the key messages that came out in terms of this funding was around simplification. So simplification, looking for those things where funds complemented each other, and also to make sure that there was some kind of help desk in place for beneficiaries.
What this simplification looks like is basically no more regulation. More regulations mean more problems.
I think, yes, that the workshop was very useful. The discussion is exactly what I needed to have. A lot of input about ESF, but also how other programs can complement ESF, but also among each other. And I'm leaving with a lot of ideas. I have my business cards in my pockets to already run from this microphone and talk with other people, because I believe that at the end of the day is going to be a lot of homework that everybody here in this room is going to have to do back home.
But it's also important to have help desks at all levels, for beneficiaries at the national level, and for those who are actually applying for the funding. This is an idea of consistency of communication and information that has been shared.
What was really interesting that everyone had the same issue and concern. We need to communicate better about what others are doing, and we need to work more together and break the silos.
We need to trust the national authorities because they are putting in place the control mechanisms. Do we need to have multiple layers of overlapping regulations? Once we have the regulations, once people know what the purpose is, just leave them on their own. Just don't do overmanaging or micromanaging. Two important messages: simplification and learn from the experience that is already there. Do not duplicate. Learn from good practice. Once you've learned from good practice, try to scale it up using the different funds.
There are some really important messages to be delivered. First of all, result-based cannot be adopted without partnership. Partnership based on courage, mutual understanding, and a process that leads to mutual trust between all the actors, from the policymakers to the managing authorities, to the audit authorities, to the final beneficiary, and down to the target groups.
Looking into the future, the Commission wants to see more of an essence, the link between payment and results.
If you talk about labor market policies, you have a number of essential partners. Sure, you need the government, but yes, you need the social partners, yes, you need the NGOs, and yes, you need the official institutions, because all need to play their role and need to play it together.
The Omnibus regulation foresees the use of a form of financing linked to the fulfillment of conditions. In other words, payments will be more than ever linked to the results.
I think some of the key messages coming from the seminar was first that if you had a monitoring and evaluation culture that was much more about what's the impact of all this money for the end beneficiaries, this would be much more effective than really just monitoring and auditing for how we're complying with very detailed regulations.
Tackling poverty and promoting independent living through deinstitutionalization were the subjects of discussion in this workshop. Participants had two examples from the Fund for European Aid for the Most Deprived, FEAD, in France and Germany, and an example of the process of deinstitutionalization in Bulgaria.
We develop in Germany a specific program for the FEAD, and that means social inclusion, and we have their different target groups. The main idea is to give them counseling and bring them nearer to the regular system in Germany.
The Bulgarian example demonstrated the importance of the cooperation between different levels of government, local authorities, and civil society.
We are still facing a lot of challenges. It has become clear that we have not finished the process, but are only just starting it, because transferring large institutions to smaller ones does not automatically mean that those children will be socially included. In other words, the work continues.
We think that there should be a more partnership approach in practice, that the member states involve cities, municipalities, local partners to discuss what are the real needs and how the programs using European Social Fund could address them in the best way, and should be more flexible because needs change in a 7-year period. Maybe there will be other needs on the ground, so we have to be able to change the priorities and adjust them to the needs on the ground.
In order to be more efficient in decreasing youth unemployment rates, the EU should find the path to creating more sustainable and quality jobs. Public employment services are the key actors in implementing the European Employment Strategy, the Youth Guarantee, and much more, the European Pillar of Social Rights. Participants in the conference declared that these institutions should change their way of working in order to be more proactive and to deliver tailor-made services to their clients. They should also work as a one-stop shop.
The cost of not investing in needs or people in situation of needs is estimated to be 142 billion euros per year. So it's much smarter to invest this amount of money and motivate the member state to invest this money than to lose this huge amount of finances.
But he warns that there is an elephant in the room when it comes to the labor market, and that it is a fact that many member states are facing job vacancies, thus stimulating mobility in the EU can make finding workers possible.
First of all, as public employment services, we should invest in data mining, because we have a lot of data of job seekers, employers, working people. So if we can analyze those data, we can offer more tailor-made and more proactive service to our clients.
The workshop entitled Learning and Working Beyond Borders was focused on social innovation practices. A special point was put on the possible conclusions for the future of European Social Fund that can be drawn from the experience of former beneficiaries of the Equal program, which operated between 2001 and 2008 and promoted new ways of combating labor market discriminations through transnational cooperation and exchanges of good practices. The debate addressed the idea of using the mechanics of Equal as a future tool that can make the conclusions achievable through transnational cooperation and exchange of practices.
Some of the benefits I see is that we need to have new responses to these, and we need an innovation system, a research and development system in social policy, which is embedded in the member states. And so we need to construct capacity not only at European level among research institutes and ministries, but also among the actors on the ground. And that will give us better bang for our buck in spending. It will produce sustainable outputs which can be capitalised in mutual learning across all the member states. And so a more intelligent system of labour market management.
The next important topic was how these practices can be transformed into potential Equal Plus initiatives in the future that can tackle new challenges of the global world and at the same time provide new benefits for European citizens.
The European Social Fund has invested a great deal in the capital of individual people. But bearing in mind the developments in the European Union during recent years, the fact that a broad diversity of people are migrating and creating communities around the European Union as a whole, we also need to invest in relationships between people, to foster understanding between people. This could be achieved if the European Social Fund also invests in building this social capital on a local level.
With an aging workforce and ongoing automation, ensuring that people have the right skills for the labor market is of huge importance for Europe. Addressing mismatches is crucial for the employability of workers, the functioning of the companies, and the economy of member states.
Firstly, we are talking about the fact that education systems must be reformed so that they not only provide knowledge but also skills, especially social communication skills, creative thinking skills, entrepreneurial skills, and those related to understanding how business works.
Because we need to learn how to learn, and we need some kind of more transversal and universal skills that we also call soft skills.
The problem is that it is difficult to anticipate the skills that will be needed in the future. In addition to that, more and more jobs and professions disappear because of automation of labor. To overcome these challenges, Europe needs to invest in universal basic skills, but also in digital skills. That means that the educational systems of member states should change.
We definitely believe that education systems should change. Although we can't expect magic to happen from education, but we have to change the way we teach, the way we learn. We have to shift from a pedagogy based on theory to a pedagogy based on practice. We believe that lifelong learning starts after education, which is actually wrong, because being a lifelong learner, it's a skill in itself, which you have to learn very early. You have to also have the culture of lifelong learning.
One of the most interesting discussions at the conference was on the future of work and the rising necessity for a work-life balance approach, ensuring better well-being. Participants agreed that the future would change not only the structure of jobs, temporary or permanent, but also the nature of the jobs. Some currently existing jobs will disappear. This may impact the entire society in terms of social protection, quality of life, and individual development. This is a challenge for the ESF as well. The trend of innovation leads to the polarization on the job market, creating growing inequalities, dividing society, and creating marginalized communities and social groups. The political challenge we face today, not only as a union, but as a civilization model, is how to bring balance in a stratified society. We cannot achieve this with a GDP-oriented mentality.
The problem that I see, the big challenge, is that we are discussing this here in Sofia in a situation, in a context in which Europe is increasingly divided in many respects. East-West, North-South, rich-poor, leading and lagging countries in terms of innovation, and also people that have access to good quality education throughout their lives and people that don't have this access. I think we have to break these divides, to bridge these divides and solve these problems. And this is one of the key challenges of the future for the European Union.
What should be done for the future of work is creating a mission-oriented approach in which the Commission, the member states, the citizens, and the stakeholders co-create the future in which we'd want to live, and then build a series of concrete, aligned initiatives that would usher us into that era.
We expect that employment will take very different forms in the future. But that means that we have new opportunities for more flexible employment, improving the work-life balance, more opportunities, equality, more inclusion and outreach to everyone who needs to be part of society.
We need to invest in people.
Of course, the aim of every one of our investments is people, only people. The focus of European politics must be directed towards developing the skills of the workforce and investing in people. Investment in education and training prepares our future.
Social policies are made by people for people. We should never forget that all people are at the same level. And I would like to quote the speech of President Juncker, where he said, "There's no such thing as a second-class European citizen, nor a second-class country, no second-class worker, no second-class consumers. We are all Europeans on an equal level."